Hi, everyone. Welcome to Genealogy Adventures. I'm Brian Sheffy.
And I'm Donya Williams. How are you guys doing today? We're sorry we weren't able to get this information out sooner. Life. That's all I can say. Life. When you're doing a lot of things and a lot of stuff is happening, these are the things that go down. But we are grateful that you guys are faithful followers, and we look forward to just talking with you guys today.
And I just checked on the technical gremlins. Yep, we are streaming on Facebook and YouTube as well as E360 TV. So we are all good.
Yes, 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 we are.
So as always, thank you guys so much for no matter how you watch us or where you watch us for tuning in for the next hour or so. And today it's just kind of a general conversation about Women's History Month because in previous seasons, we've always gone for the big stories and the epic stories, and don't get me wrong, those are really, really important. But today, for this month and for this season, and for today in particular, I thought it would be kind of nice to talk about more kind of I don't know if would you call them more humble type stories, or the I guess the ones that are so collective they just don't get
I
overall
don't know if
attention.
humble. I don't know if humble is the right word. I think the everyday woman,
The everyday, that's a good way of putting it.
the everyday.
And there is a movie that kind of sparked this conversation we're going to have today. At least it sparked it for me. I don't know why it took me so long to watch the movie The Help. Donnie had told me about it. Her sister had told me about it. Other people had told me about it. And I guess it just wasn't in the mindset or the mood to kind of see it. But the other day, I wanted to watch something that was entertaining, maybe a little bit funny, historical, but wasn't going to be too deep or too depressing or too dark. I just wasn't kind of in that mindset. And I was going through Amazon Prime and it popped up. And I'm like, everyone's been telling me what a good movie this is. Maybe I should watch it. Maybe I'm in the mood now to watch it. And I'm really glad I did because it got me to thinking about just a whole generation of women. And in this context, I'm not even going to just limit it to African American women, to just poor working class women in the United States across the board who just went out there every day, did their thing to put food on the table, along with their husbands, to put food on the table, clothes on their kids' backs, books in their hands. They just did what they had to do. And remember, Donnie, when we were driving in the car, the thing that really hit me was these women worked 5, 6 days a week for long hours, not much money, and no social security. It dawned on me that there was no social security at all.
Right. And I want to say this, and this is no shade to the men of the world or whatever the case may be, but I'm not worried about them going with them. Like you said, doing it with your husband. Nope, this is not about them. We already know what the men do, what men do. We know that. It's about these women who pick up the slack that these men are unable to take care of. That's what, or they pick up the slack. I'll say it like that. I'm not saying that they're unable, but this is about the women that pick up that slack, that pick up that other side, that extra stuff that's going on, because that's what we do. That's what women have been doing all since the beginning of time. I can remember when you and I was sitting in the car and we was talking, and I said, you know what that does? I said, that really sounds like a great show. And I said, I just watched, although it's fiction, I just watched Mary Poppins. Everybody know about Mary Poppins, right? And the wife was completely about women, vote for women, and this, that, and the third. But I tell you, between her and Mary, the husband had he had no chance, because he was getting talked into doing everything and didn't even realize he was getting talked into doing everything, but he was the man of the house and everything had to go the way that he did. So it was so funny because there was one scene where he got upset because he felt like his Mary Poppins wasn't doing what she was supposed to do for the kids. And basically he said, yeah, they need to be taught how to do this and taught how to do that and blah, blah, this, that, and the third. And you are slacking in it. She said, you're absolutely right. I will have them dressed and ready so they can go with you and learn what you want them to know. And he looked at her for a minute and he was like, and then turned and looked at his wife. And he was like, did I say that? And she said, yeah, you did. And boom, he is now responsible for the kids and didn't even know we set you up, men, whether y'all realize it or not. We set you up and you don't even know it.
And again, the thing that really, even though they didn't really kind of specifically mention it in the Help, the movie The Help, one of the things that kind of really stood out to me is specifically about the housekeepers and the nannies and all of that was they raised a generation of leaders. They raised, because again, they were working for upper middle class families, for wealthy families. So we're talking they raised, men who would go on to become mayors or local councilmen or state representatives or state senators or, national senators and in the House of Republicans, judges, lawyers, doctors.
Yeah. I mean, that's always been done though. Even through slavery times, they raised these well-known, well-to-do men. They were able to take care of these people that was going to one day become boss of this, one day become, CEO of that. They were going to take care. They were going to take over the world.
And presidents, you can't forget more than a few of them raised a couple of presidents.
And presidents, you're absolutely right. My sister and I was we were talking, and we were talking about something similar to this, and dang, it just slipped my mind. Go ahead, Brian. I hate that.
And I was going to say, on the flip side of that, in New England, you had women who worked in textile mills, factories, all of that, all of those kind of things. And then, and at the end of a long day, having to go home, make sure that a meal was on the table, that the kids were looked after, or, they may have had to look after their parents, for instance, all of that kind of a thing, just to keep, just to keep things ticking over.
I'm trying to think of what it was that my sister and I were pointing out, and I cannot for the life of me think about that. But, guys, share your stories about your everyday moms or what it is that you do. Because I can honestly say that my mother told me a story about my grandmother. Washington, D.C., it grows. Like every city, things grow, they change, whatever the case may be. And back in the day, there were trolleys on H Street Northeast. Well, when my grandfather was sick or down for a year, my grandmother sold sandwiches off the trolleys to those that was building the H Street corridor. So it was really an amazing thing to learn. She and my aunt sis, what they called her. And it was just really an amazing thing that she just picked up where my grandfather couldn't. She picked up and she did what was necessary in order, to move him forward and make sure that things are gonna go the right way. Because mind you guys, my mom is a baby of 14. So when this, she had to do all of that, even though the rent back then was like $5. So, or $10, that was a lot of money. $40 for rent, that was a lot of money. And that stuff had to be taken care of. So yeah, this is, our families do some things. They do a lot. They do a lot.
And I'll give you an example. I've never written about it. I don't think I've actually spoken about it. So my mother is a DC girl, or she was a DC girl. That's where she was born and raised. My dad was Upper Montclair, New Jersey, even though both of his parents came from Virginia. Again, that's the Great Migration for you. And he was in the Navy when he met my mom. So when they got married, I think, he kind of negotiated with her that, she would be a stay-at-home wife. And, my sister came along a little over a year after they got married. So, she was a stay-at-home mom, raising the kids. until my father had to. My mother wasn't happy about my dad being in the Navy. She wasn't happy about him being gone for so many months at a time. So she asked him to leave, and he did. When his time came up to not reenlist, he didn't. So he ended up doing door to door insurance sales in East Orange, New Jersey, to be able to pay for the mortgage that they had, basically. And my mom, to make up the kind of shortcoming income, she worked in a laundromat. Apparently, she worked around my brother and my sister's kind of school schedule. But yeah, she was working pretty much as many hours as she actually could. Then my dad, I guess, kind of got tired of struggling to pay the mortgage and reenlisted. And my mom continued. She had given up. She had already done her associate's degree from the university, and she just went back to being a stay-at-home mom. Like I said, my dad in the Navy had more than enough income to, for us to enter the good old middle class. And anyway, to cut a long story short, when I started junior high school, they renegotiated that arrangement so that my mother could finish her degree. She got a degree in childhood development. And I wish I knew the woman who founded this organization in New London, Connecticut. It was called the Young Parents Program, and it was set up in the late 70s, early 80s. I'm a little bit hazy on that one, where teenage pregnant girls could go to school and have their babies, still go to school to complete their education, but their babies were actually in a nursery on the premises. And that's where my mom came in. She was part of that kind of childhood development part of it.
Mm.
And the whole concept was created by a woman, and I wish I could remember her name, because that was a really kind of pioneering thing to do back then. And all of the women who were working for this program were kind of pioneers in their field. And in doing that, my mother realized there was a real issue in Connecticut in terms of adopting brown and black babies. They just weren't getting adopted. They were just either being fostered out or they were staying in state care. So when my father stopped serving on the submarines but was still in the Navy on the base in Groton, they set up an agency, largely led by my mother, that was pioneering for Connecticut, that was all about getting brown and black babies actually adopted into their forever families. And again, it's just stories like that. Nothing huge, nothing major, nothing groundbreaking. It didn't put men on the moon. Um, it didn't change life as we know it. But for those girls, I'm just thinking about the Young Parents Program. For those girls who went through that through that program, got their degrees, didn't have to give their babies away if they didn't want to. That was life altering. That
Yeah.
literally changed their life, and it was just a group of forward-thinking women who created that.
Yeah, yeah. And then you have, the mothers that help with the founding of the churches. Another thing that my grandmother made sure, and this wasn't just told to me by my mom, this was also told to me of some of the elders of the church. So I think, for those that don't know, my grandparents founded two, possibly three churches right here in the DC area. And one of them was named after the church that they were married in Edgefield. That church is called Springfield Baptist Church. Well, the Springfield Baptist Church here, I want to tell y'all, the first time they've told me so much about what my grandmother did there. My grandmother made sure that every child had a Christmas gift. It was if they went attended that church, then they were going to have a gift. They took care of the pastor. She was the one that was a part of making sure that pastor had everything he needed. She took care of the people. And that was something that was passed down to me, not just by my mom, but by other people of the church. Now, what's really crazy is that around, I think, before we started this, so I'm going to say between 2011 2012, I actually started working at the church, and I was working as a communications assistant, and everything. And I'd never gone to the older church, the original church. So the way Springfield is set up, there's the original church, and right next door to it is the more modern one. I worked out of the modern one, and I never really been in the older one. Y'all, the first time I walked into that door, I could feel my grandparents, specifically my grandmother. I felt everything about it. And the feeling had overwhelmed me so much so that the lady that I was in there talking to, because I was getting ready to write a story about the daycare. So I needed more information. And she was like, "Are you okay?" And I said, I'm just I just feel my grandmother. She says, "Oh, we feel her all the time." I'm like, "What?" So, it's just it's one of the most amazing things that these women, even though they're passed on, they still make sure things are cared for. This lady literally came out her mouth and said, she makes sure we are cared for, that we have what we need. We feel her. I said, wow. So these are things that these women were great. They were unsung, they were unknown, but they did awesome things.
Well, I'm curious. I want to stay on this theme because, again, one of my great grandmothers in Rich Square, Northampton County, North Carolina, she was a founding member of an AME church. And I guess I never really thought about what the role of women in leadership in a church like that, whether it's a Baptist church or an AME church. What was kind of, I mean, I knew, I get a sense that they were kind of a linchpin within their communities, but what was the role? What kind of things were they doing? What kind of things was your grandmother doing?
So my grandmother, okay, so there was a whole they actually honored my grandmother, and my mom had to speak the day that they did that. I wish I could pull up the actual speech, but my grandmother pretty much just took care of everything. She was head of the deaconess board. She so anything that comes with being a deaconess, all of those, everything that comes with that, from the care of money to the care of the church grounds to the washing of the clothes to making sure everything was clean. She was the head of all of those things. But then she took an even more, because the church, my grandparents, they split with the first church they founded. It seems like there may have been an issue when they split with that church. So when they split with the first church and started the second one, it was like my grandparents took a whole nother route in how this church was going to be founded. And in doing so, my grandfather's name was on everything. Like when you go and you pull the deed to this church, to the original deed to the church, my grandfather's name is there. So this literally my family's church. This Springfield is my family's church. And so she was the one that was right there for a while. They even paid the bills for the church. So that meant she had to do work. You know what I'm saying? She was working on all these things. And then when they got the pastor lived with my family. So there was
Oh,
care.
wow.
Yeah, there was care on that end. Oh man, his name just left my head. I wish my mother would tell me, get online and tell me. But Gallman, she told me in my head, Pastor Gallman, Reverend Gallman. He, his family, they were a part of my family. So from buying, making sure they had clothes, making sure that she was a part of being that. You think of that old school mom that took care of every single thing. That is what Annie Mae Senior Yeldale did.
So I'm getting a sense that women in that role would have been looking in on members of the community,
Yeah.
checking in with the elderly if people were out of work or going hungry or
Yep.
whatever, just making sure that their flock, their community was, even if they couldn't provide them with money, was getting support in other ways. Is that
Yeah.
is that kind of a fair assessment?
It's very fair. I mean, when I think, if for all of those that follow gospel music, and some of you may have heard of Edna Goldman Cook. Well, Edna Goldman Cook was the daughter to Reverend Goldman. Shirley Caesar admits that she gets her singing style from Edna Goldman Cook. This lady actually got her start at Springfield Baptist Church. She is the godmother to one of my first cousins. So this lady was very well known in the gospel realm. My grandmother took care of her. You know, so when you think when what you said earlier about bringing up, you know, the next generation of infamous people or people of, you know, of some type
Just,
of,
yeah,
yeah,
just renowned. They
renowned.
have
Yeah,
renowned.
but
Yeah.
she was definitely a renowned person. She was definitely renowned. And it was Edna Goldman Cook. You know, they were all, it was that whole line of people. It's amazing what she did and who she was and the short life that she lived, because she died when she was 50. But she did all of this during that time period, and it was just awesome to me when I think about it.
You know, and I'm, like I said, I'm just really glad that we're having this conversation, you know, to kind of lead into Women's History Month, because as I said, as essential as trailblazers are, as essential as women who break through barriers are, there's a much larger army of women who would never see themselves as heroic or
Right,
heroines that still did stuff.
right, right. I mean, I could sit and I could think, you know, when we're talking about everyday people, I don't know if my cousin is at my mom's house yet or if she's watching this, but her mother was an everyday person, if that's what you want to call it. But her mother was like the savior to my sister and her brother. You know, there were, and even though they all kind of grew up together, when something was going down, this woman who's also named after my mom, her name was Juanita. Juanita was the nickname Bugs. She was there, you know. She was there. She took care of everything. Nobody messed with my sister and my cousin Timmy. This doesn't mean that my sister and my cousin Timmy was slouches in any kind of way, but if they knew that that was Bugs' brother and Bugs' cousin, nobody, it was not going to be touched. And even as I got older, I felt the same sense. You know, I felt very protected around her. And then she put it into her girls. And my cousin, she's still very protective over me, her daughter, who's at my mom's house. But her sister, she protected all of us. When I think about TT or Joyce Lynn as most, you know, when people know her, but we know her as TT, man, we could do whatever we wanted to do. Nobody was going to do anything to us. And, you know, it was just an overall feel of protection. And these are like some of the sweetest people I've ever known in my life. And I knew that they cared for me. I knew that. So it's always some type of protection that we have going on amongst our families that we just don't realize.
You know, and again, I think about my paternal grandfather's older sister. Actually, no, sorry, younger sister, Esther, Miss Esther Turner. Again, in D.C. Well, back then it was called the Department of Indian Affairs, and she was not only a woman of color, but she was working in the IT department, which was a heavily masculine male world.
Right.
I think she was only one of, and this is going back in the late 60s, early 70s. I think you could count the number of women who worked in that department who weren't secretaries on one hand. And yeah, you didn't mess with Miss Turner.
Right.
Even the men, they gave her the utmost respect because she knew, she knew her stuff.
Yeah, yeah. So let's go to the comments. Nine Nichols, she said, and I think this is my cousin, if I'm not mistaken. She said, without the older women in my family helping my mom with food and clothing, where would I be today? And then Carol Regis, she says, on my maternal lineage, I come from a long list of domestic care providers. Their survival depended on it. I believe it developed over time as an occupation, as it has been passed on from generation to generation. So this wasn't it. When I read her comment, being the domestic care provider wasn't even thought of as an occupation. It actually turned into one to her family because they knew how to do, those types of things. And Nine Nichols again, she says, my great grandma told me to go to nursing school right before she died. She saw the potential in me when I didn't. So that's that support that, that comes from those families. I really, really wish that I had been able to meet my grandmother, even though I feel like she sits on my shoulder on a regular basis, I never got the opportunity, never got the opportunity to meet her.
And again, some of our guests are reflecting various aspects of what we're talking about, who are going to be coming on as part of Women's History Month. We actually have the first female mayor of a Tennessee town, who's going to be joining us this month. I think you spoke to her today, or you were corresponding back and forth with her today. And well, you can tell it because all her replies and response to what you were saying.
I
She
mean,
was just keeping it real and keeping it humble.
yeah, she really was. So what he's talking about is, and I hadn't spoken to her. This was actually done on that program that we saw her on, and basically what she said was, she was in the middle of a program and she did the program, but while she's doing this program and talking about these things that had gone on in her town, right in her living room were some children waiting for her because they had a program that they had to do for Black History Month and she needed to be there for it. So it's not like she could stay on the program. She did what she had to do, and she was like, even though I'm the mayor, I still have to open the door when they knock. So she's like, mayor or no mayor, I'm still going to do my job as that other mother to these kids that need me regardless. It's like we always wear 1,000,001 hats. And then if another hat is necessary, then we'll make it 1,000,002. It's no problem with doing that. It's never a problem with doing that. And I think that's one of the things that makes me very proud to be a female. But in the same instance, I got heavy shoes to fill. You know what I'm saying? At all times.
So D. Turner's asked the question, did segregation assist in the consolidation of power, of influence, responsibility, and organizational stability? I'm going to slightly disagree with that. And in terms of, because this wasn't just an African American thing, and it may have done for African Americans, but as I said in the top of the show, working class women who were coming from poor families, it didn't matter what ethnicity you would identify as or what race. If you were in New England, you were working in the factories, you're working in the garment district. I mean, I've got a wonderful story about the woman who kind of created a unionized working force in New York. Another one who's Chinese American, Sue Ko Lee, did the same thing in Sacramento, California. These women hated that they were working in really dangerous factories, really dangerous working environments. And again, I wish that they were still alive because I would love to speak to them. I mean, I'm sure they saw the blowback that men were getting when they were trying to consolidate their labor, trying to make their workplaces more safe. I can't even imagine the bravery it must have taken for a woman in those time periods to do exactly the same thing. They were They were the kind of the Norma Rays of their time period.
I mean, everybody was a Norma Ray during that time. That's the crazy part. They don't get that kind of recognition, but I mean, when you think about it, my grandmother was a Norma Ray. She really touched everything. She touched on every single thing that happened, and then she passed that on to her kids, who then, in so many ways, passed certain things on to us. Now, did some of us forget that?
Yep.
That's another story. But
and also not to forget our Spanish-speaking sisters out there back in the day who were fighting for the rights for, again, better wages for migrant workers, better wages for farm workers in California and in the Southwest.
Yeah, I mean, so we're going to talk about that. Let's talk about because my biggest pet peeve is the fact that they were going to put Harriet Tubman on the $20 bill because of women's right to vote when she didn't have a right to vote. So that's probably one of the biggest pet peeves that I have in the world right now, outside of other stuff. But yeah, that bothers me. But people don't realize that the women of Delta Sigma Theta was walking right beside these women. making sure all of this. Dorothy Height had a lot, all of those people, those types of people, they had a lot to do with why women today can vote, can get the things that they can get. So that's why, in my opinion, the way that we've allowed so many things to go to the wayside, like how we control our own bodies, it's almost, in my opinion, disrespectful to the fight that these women had to go through in order to give us that right. This is a right. And you allowed it to go away. You allowed it to get taken by this other stuff. This don't have anything to do with being liberal or being conservative. This doesn't have it's your God-given right to protect yourself in the best way that you know how, not somebody else, because they're not in your body. You're always told by your mom or even your dad in some instances, depending on how how conservative, how liberal he is with his daughters. I can't tell you what to do. My nephew Ronnie, he could quickly tell his girls, because he don't have number girls, and he will look at them and he will say, look, if you don't feel right, you have to tell me that way I know the next step that I can do to make sure that you are okay. I need to take you to the doctors because you don't feel right. I don't know how you feel. I don't know what your feeling is or anything like that. So it's when you think about the right to vote, the right to vote was a real thing. The right to be able now they're fighting for the money, the right to make the same amount of money when that one man does, and we do the same thing. And I don't make the same amount. That's crazy. I do the same thing as you do. Why I don't make the same amount? So all of these rights that we're really fighting for, it has nothing to do with liberal or conservative. It's about making it equal for you.
And I'm glad you said that, because I'm just going to respond once more to D. Turner. I'm not saying that it's segregation. What I'm saying, at the risk of sounding like a European socialist, it's wealth. Because I just rattled off how similarities between African American women, Asian women, white women who are, up in the textile factories in New England, Spanish-speaking women in the South, in the Southwest, and the West Coast. If you were to sit them down, all of them from poor backgrounds, and they were to talk about the kind of oppression that they were facing, or what they wanted to achieve in terms of a safer work environment, safer place to raise their kids, more money, recognition for the work that they did, they would see a commonality in their experience.
Right.
I'm not saying that segregation didn't have an outsized influence on Black women, but that basically the whole thing boils down to wealth calls the shots.
Right.
And basically impacted women of all walks of life.
Right. So then D said, Danya, are you saying that alongside every empowered Black woman is a supportive Black man? No, I'm not saying that. No more so than I would say that beside every strong Black man is a woman, because we have those issues where somebody disappears, somebody goes a different way. But when you have that combination, what a combination it is what I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm saying. When that combination happens, there's no stopping it.
And we have a poster couple for that. We have Barack and Michelle.
Oh, yes, we do. We have a yes. That's a great poster couple. But I mean, the stories that I've learned, not just about my grandmother, my great grandmother. She was a little short little thing, and I don't think the one thing that I heard consistently was, "Oh, ain't nobody mess with Lula. Nobody mess with Mama Lula." I promise y'all, she was all of about 4'11". She was tiny. She was a little thing, but nobody messed with Mama Lula. Nobody. It was not going to happen. Everybody in the Edgefield area knew my great grandmother. Everybody. And they knew where she lived, and they knew it's a reason for that. It's because she probably took care of everybody's kids. She probably she probably made sure everybody was eating when they weren't, because just like my grandparents founded the Springfield here, it was that same family that had something to do with founding the Springfield and Edgefield. So it was ingrained in them to be able to take care of and do what we need to do. And let's not forget the fact that women of that time, and now I'm speaking about Black women. I don't, because I'm Black, so I don't know about white women or Hispanic women or whatever. But the Black women of that time, they took care of everything. Everything. The man worked, but the women did everything else. It was that simple. And they told their husbands that if I die, you need to find somebody else quick, because you don't need to be by yourself. There's a reason why they were doing that. And they were doing this stuff, y'all, at 14 years old. These were grown women in the mind at 14. They weren't children. They weren't babies. When I tell y'all, that opened my head up when I started doing my research and learning how these young girls were, not only were they 14 years old, but they were married, had kids, had a home, everything. They did the whole life. And it wasn't play for them. It was real. That was it. It wasn't something about, oh yeah, I'm out now. Bye. Then did you have something to do that? Yeah, they was going around. They was having their kids and leaving their kids with their siblings. We found one woman who had 7 kids, and she did not take care of their one of them. So, yeah, that.
And again, to partially answer a question asked by a viewer, and again, I'm going to speak about the Black experience. Anyone who's coming from a different ethnicity who can post on Facebook or YouTube in the audience, please do. Black people in general, and Black women in specifically coming from an enslaved background, never had cash to do anything with. We always had our ingenuity, force of will, and just a talent for making something out of nothing.
Yep. I mean, when you go back to slavery time, they got the scraps of the food. How y'all think chitlins came to pass? Let's just, I mean, how I know everybody don't eat chitlins. I'm gonna keep it real, and I'm gonna keep it very honest with you. When my mother told me you don't eat them,
nope.
That's all
I
right.
tried. In my household, you had to try everything at least once. I tried them. My dad loved them. They were his. Uncontested.
And I mean, my mother, when I was a little girl, my sister's favorite meal, my mom would always fix my sister's favorite meal for her birthday: potato salad, chitlins, collard greens. With that was the favorite meal, and I used to love that. And then one day she told me what chitlins were, and I was like, man, I can't eat that. I'm a little girl. You kidding? No, man, I can't eat that. Y'all, I went outside. It was stinking to me at that point. Now I'm smelling it. It stinks, it stinks, it stinks. I went outside, I came back, the smell changed. It wasn't stinking no more. It was smelling like that food that I like to eat. And I was like, well, I'll try a little bit. So I was right back to it. I'm going to eat me some chitlins. But where the thing is that the intelligence of how to make sure it was cleaned and taking, and all of the nastiness is taken from those types of things, will allow made these women, they cooked it. They made sure it was good. They made sure everything was all right.
So, someone posted oxtail. Now, I am down with oxtails. Put some oxtails with some rice and peas in front of me. I'm a happy man.
I saw that. They posted oxtail.
But on the flip side, again, thinking about ancestors who were free people of color, specifically free women of color. Again, a lot of them, some of them had what we consider to be a middle class lifestyle, but a lot of them didn't. They were dirt poor, even though they were free. Because again, their husbands faced prejudice in terms of the jobs that they could get, people who'd hire them to work for them. And their wives and their daughters would take in washing from the neighborhood or go work in someone's house. So again, put in a full day's work of hard graft and hard labor, come back, look after, feed the kids, feed the men of the house, get everything ready together for the next day to do it all over again.
And let me tell you one person who I really admire, and I don't know this woman from Adam. And I will admit that I'm actually going based off of a movie. But if this woman was anything like this movie says she was, when I tell y'all I love Ray Charles's mother, the strength that they had that woman, the way she had nothing. But she had no problem telling them, no, don't short me on my money, because I have to do this. Ray, you got to be this way. I need you to learn how to do this because you can't see. I'm going to keep it real with you, Ray. You going blind, son. That's literally how she was talking to him. She said, your eyesight is going. You don't have it no more. So you're going to have to learn. You're going to have to count. You're going to have to figure this out. If this woman was anything like the movie portrayed her, that had to have been one of the strongest women that I have ever heard of in my life. Ever. Because she was not the one. And when that lady shorted her money, she went and knocked on that door banging. What you not going to do is short me my money. And then threw all the clothes on the floor, in the dust, in the dirt, and give me my money still. That's what she did. I will never forget that scene. She was like, oh, no, you're not going to pay me? So she started throwing the stuff on the ground. The lady was like, here's your money. Thank you. And left the shit on the, and left the stuff on the ground. I'm sorry. Yeah, and she just left it right there on the ground. But I'm telling y'all, Ray Charles' mom was everything to me. Ray Charles' mom, everything. So Dee Turner made a comment again. She says, Danya comes from a family of herbalists and midwives. My great-grandmother spoke of this. So as you can see, guys, me and Dee are cousins. But yeah, we do. I do come from definitely midwives. I've seen them on birth certificates, or the delayed certificates, seeing our family's names just being written right across there, that's the person that done that. So midwives, all of that. And when Brian pointed out the fact that these women, the nannies and all of that they got no Social Security, they weren't paying into Social Security. So when everything ended, that was it. They had no money coming back. They couldn't go for retirement. I don't know. I admire these people.
And again, sticking with the movie The Help, look at that. One of the central characters, her mother, joined this, I guess, fictitious organization called the Daughters of America. Had a nanny or a nanny/housekeeper that that her mother had as it seemed like a girl herself. And in one blip, I mean, this was really, I want to say that the nanny by this point in the movie was probably in her 70s, maybe almost knocking on 80. One blip, and that was it. She was fired, job gone, told to leave the house.
Wow.
So there was just no security there. And again, keeping on the theme, it's one of the reasons why I'm loving learning about the Jewish side of my family. And for those of you who are new to this show, found out a couple of years ago that one of my great grandfathers was a Jewish man here in DC, and finding out what they faced back in Russia, which is where they left, and hearing about how the Jewish women, especially back in Russia, but the communities that they joined when they rocked up here to America, they really did form a kind of sisterhood, a supportive sisterhood, because they faced discrimination here, not to the degree that they faced it in Russia, but they still faced prejudice and hostility here. And they just really formed that kind of community that Black women had formed, and I'm sure other women did too. And again, I hope people watching this, um, who come from like Irish backgrounds and Italian backgrounds or whatever backgrounds you come from, it would be great if you could share the stories of the kind of communities that your female ancestors built, especially in this country. Um, so it's great hearing about the kind of overall similarities, but the differences between these groups of women, it also makes it really interesting to talk about.
It does. It does. I think, speaking on African American women, they had that sisterhood back in the day, and I hate to say to say they had, because it's not like that today. They're trying to get it back. That's the Black girl magic stuff, and in my opinion, now I may be wrong. Y'all correct me, but we are nowhere near like we were then. I think one of the things that bothers me the most is that when people talk about how Black people don't help each other out, that was the only way they could survive back then. So Black people have helped each other out. Um,
Okay, no, I'm going to stick with this point because that is really good. You are making a good point, an excellent point actually, because I couldn't imagine Hattie James, if Twitter had existed in her era, or Facebook, dragging another Black actress down. I couldn't imagine
nope,
Josephine Baker
nope.
if Twitter or Facebook had existed in her time period, dragging another Black singer down. I can't imagine it.
Mm-mm.
I just can't.
No, you cannot. You cannot. They didn't do those kinds of things because we were already down. So why am I going to make it worse? That's the overall thought process. I'm already under the dirt. Why am I going to go and pull you down even further and dig a deeper hole for you? No. It's not even possible to do. Y'all got to think about the fact to say that Black women or Black people or whatever you want to say didn't support each other. Y'all, you had children who were taken away from their enslaved mothers. They were separated at young ages from their parents. Who do you think took care of those kids? It was somebody else's mama who took care of that kid. They became a part of that child. So the strength and the fact that I'm sitting here with 5 kids of my own, and I see this baby sitting over here in the corner by himself because mom has now been taken, dad has now been taken. He don't have no siblings or nothing like that. Then guess what? Come here, honey. Come on over here, sit down and eat. Come on, I got you. And that's what happened with so many of those children that were orphaned or whatever. And then they go and they create these homes. Oh yeah, all these Black kids were left by themselves. No, you separated them. You separated them from their families, and now they really are orphans because of what you did. Don't do that. Don't come off and say that they're orphans because their families left them. Nobody left them. You took them. You stole them. You got rid of them. That's the issue. So when I look and I think about all of these Black women or these mothers or even the white women, I watched a documentary about Frederick Douglass. And do y'all realize that when he got and a lot of people know about him, but I'm just gonna say this. When he was moved to Maryland and with the family that he was moved to, that white woman had no idea that she was not supposed to teach that child how to read and write. She just knew that he needed to be able to read and write in order for him to do what he needed to do. So she started doing it. Her husband had to tell her, no, you can't teach that boy that. And then she didn't know, so she stopped. But then every now and then she slid a book to him because she knew. So I'm on, man.
Again, I would probably describe that as a passive form of resistance, going, yeah, I hear you, but still, I can just, the quiet book every now and again.
Yeah. And then Angie Wilson said it best. When I was growing up, that village existed, but today too many people have not experienced it. So it's hard to imagine. And she's right. I had a village. I really did. Yeah, I'm born in 1972. I ain't need no daggone nanny. But guess who had a nanny? Me. I'm a spoiled. I'm spoiled. I need y'all to know that I am rotten to the core. And the young girl, because she was a young girl that took care of me while my mama worked, her name was Joyce. And when I tell you I love Joyce so much, and I love Joyce because Joyce didn't try to replace my mother. She could not replace my mother. If those that know me know that Juanita is on a serious pedestal in my life. But Joyce was my heart. I love Joyce. I would go anywhere with her, do anything. She did my hair. She made sure I got to school. She fed me. She clothed me. She did all of that stuff. Me and my little rotten tail. I was rotten. I was rotten.
But again, sticking with that, it wasn't until I started doing genealogy and started trying to add certain people to my tree that I realized that they weren't biological family. I grew up I can remember growing up as a teenager calling this person auntie, this person uncle, this whole group of women auntie. And I was actually on the phone to my mom and I'm like, whose child is Elsie? Because I don't see her as being a sibling to either granddad or grandma. She's like, oh no, she's just a dear old family friend. Like, oh, okay. But again, that's our, you were talking about our inclusive culture and whatnot, and that's a classic example of it. All of these people that I grew up calling auntie and uncle, who weren't aunts and uncles, at least not in the biological sense.
Oh, but my Aunt Sue ain't nobody but my aunt. I don't care what nobody say. That's not my mama's sister. But let me tell you something. My Aunt Susie Nelson, that was my auntie. That was my auntie, my Aunt Susie. Not that I needed another aunt. I mean, look, my mom is a baby of 14. I already had 7 aunts. But Susie Nelson was number 8. Because as she will forever be number 8. I have a cousin that I grew up with, that she's a cousin on one of my other cousins' side. But you can't tell me that this woman is not my cousin. No more so than you can tell her father that he is not the sibling to my first cousin. It's not, none of those things. And guess what? They on my tree. That's how much I have them. That's how much they are a part of my family. I think when I think about my family tree, that's the only thing that's wrong in it. But guess what? That's my tree. That's my tree.
So as we're having this conversation, again, it's just really instilling in me that, and again, it's not taking men out of the picture entirely on this one, but women really did create, essential parts of what I would call community.
Yeah.
And I just don't know if that's still one that should be celebrated and it should be acknowledged and it should be respected and honored. I just don't know if it's happening anymore.
It's not. It's not.
And that's a sad thing. That's a sad thing to lose.
It's a horrible thing. I know that with my children, me and their dad created a community for them. So my daughter there was not anywhere that my daughter could go that somebody didn't know her. They would look at her like she'd walk across the street to the store and she'd say something, and the next thing they know, hey, ain't you Juan's daughter? Just like that. Hey, you nowhere. She couldn't go anywhere without somebody knowing who she was. I was somewhat of an embarrassing mom. So when we went to school, I'm gonna keep it real. I would go to school with little business cards like this. I would go to school with little business cards, child face on it, all our information. If they act ugly, give me a call. I'm that mom. I'm that mom. So it was, and then they got to the point where they were like, do I need to call your mother? No, please don't call that lady. That was my son Marcus. No, please don't call her. Don't, I'm good. We good, So yeah, The village, I was a part of a village. We lived in a cul-de-sac in 6th Street Northwest, and all of those children were watched by all of the adults in that cul-de-sac, all of them. So I had my own, I had a village. I was privy to that. And I tried to recreate that for my children. And I think I did to a certain degree, given the timing, the period, the way we are. But now, no, they don't have that. They don't have that.
And in the closing minutes of the show, is it fair to say that the guests who are going to be joining us this month to cover different aspects of Women's History Month, they're going to touch on many of the themes that we've discussed?
Yes, they are. They are. And I can't wait. And I'm really excited to share this stuff, with you guys. And I'm hoping that you pass it on and share it with others as well. This hour went fast.
Yes, it did.
It did. It went
sure
fast.
did.
That's probably because they know I got stuff I got to do. I got some things I got to do. But no, we want to thank you guys for joining us today. And don't forget, we will be talking with, her name just left my mouth. But we will have a great show for you next week.
We do indeed. Again, not just the first female mayor of her Tennessee town, first African-American female mayor of her town.
That's
just
right.
Cannot wait to get her on the show.
Exactly. I can't think of her name for nothing. So
it's just gone out of my head too.
Well, I'm Danya. Thank you for joining us.
I'm Brian, and as always, you can catch us right here in your favorite spots, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Until then, have a great Sunday.
Yes, have a great Sunday. Bye, guys.
Bye.